So back in late 2020, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser took the lead in a 35-state bipartisan lawsuit, according to the Colorado Sun at the time, that was filed against tech giant Google, accusing the company of anti-competitive conduct and monopolistic behavior surrounding its search engine and advertising arm. The 115-page filing was filed in federal court in Washington, D.C., and at the time, it alleged that Google had choked out other search engine websites like Microsoft's Bing, and that hurt customers' access to a competitive marketplace and companies' ability to acquire customers, according to the lawsuit, especially in the travel, home improvement, and entertainment sectors, where businesses like Yelp, Expedia, and HomeAdvisor have been harmed. Well, a judge dismissed a significant portion of this multi-state lawsuit against Google's search business this past week. For more on this lawsuit and what's going on there, and why it may not be such a good way to go with a lawsuit like this, let's talk about it with Pete Sepp. He is the president of the National Taxpayers Union and joins me now. Good morning, Pete. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Thanks for taking some time to join us on the program. I appreciate it. So before we get into what the judge ruled, perhaps, and your thoughts on this, and I'll also offer my own as well, give us sort of the top line. I read a little bit from a Colorado Sun story a couple of years ago. What is this lawsuit about?
This lawsuit is almost a template of many, many previous lawsuits against various different companies, not only in the tech sector, but other parts of our economy that assert anti-competitive behavior that really doesn't necessarily harm consumers. And that's the problem that we see in these cases. Antitrust and competitiveness policy is guided by two federal agencies, the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. The state attorneys general have, over the past couple of decades, become increasingly involved in this too. And the consumer welfare standard has been a legal doctrine guiding many antitrust suits, and successful ones, frankly, over the past 40 years or so. And it basically says, if the government wants to break up a company, fine a company, sanction a company, require certain competitiveness features in a product, it has to prove that consumers themselves are being harmed by the status quo. They're paying too much, they're not getting the right kinds of services that they want, etc. These types of lawsuits are basically about billionaires wanting the government to sue other billionaires because they don't feel they have enough market share. And this case, that was brought against Google, had 7 counts to it. It was merged. There were actually 2 suits, the federal one and the state ones. They were basically cobbled together. Judge Mehta of the U.S. District Court looked at 7 counts of the government's combined case, and he threw out 4 of them. He said, number 1, that the exclusivity deals for web browsers and the preloading of Google services on its Android devices, yeah, those are valid claims. But he said that the government had not demonstrated the anti-competitive, anti-consumer effect to prove that Google, for example, broke the law by boosting its own products and search results. And that really hurt several of the litigants who were egging on the government. We're talking about Yelp and TripAdvisor, because they're saying, look, our products are not being sufficiently elevated in Google's search results over the ones that Google prefers, and that's anti-competitive. Well, the judge said, no, that you have not necessarily proven that, and even if you could, that is not evidence of anti-competitive behavior. I can tell you, consumers as well as taxpayers are saying, good job, Judge Mehta, because These cases need to be narrowed to much, much more specific concerns about things that actually harm consumers and taxpayers rather than just mess up competitors' business models.
So that preloading apps piece with Google, you said that was a piece that they were allowing to, the judge was allowing to move forward, or was that part
Yes.
of? Okay. You know, just as a quick aside, I think that's an absurd claim because it's not the 1990s anymore with Internet Explorer. It is so easy to download whatever browser that you would like just with the tap of a couple of your finger a couple of times on the phone. Literally, that's like all that it takes. So I'll say, just from my view, that is an anti-competitive that makes perfect sense. It's convenient, and you still have other options. But to this lawsuit, when it's about anti-competitive behavior, look, we have a lot of folks who are listening right now who would say, actually, Pete Sepp, the big tech sector is far too monopolistic, far too anti-competitive. You have the likes of Google, Amazon, Apple, Twitter, these various companies that are sort of cornering the market in their own way. At least this is the perception. So why shouldn't there be lawsuits brought by the feds or even the state governments to the courts saying, wait, we need to do something about these companies and their monopolistic behavior? What is your overarching argument to say, maybe not?
Yeah, there are several, actually. First, this opens the door to a dramatic expansion of government power over all of our economy. Lena Khan, who's the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, has made no secret that she wants to use her agency to reorder the entire way the U.S. economy works, making it what she believes is, quote, fairer, unquote, to historically disadvantaged classes in the United States. Her agency has run amok through all parts of the economy, from airlines to pharmaceuticals to retail, all over the place, even stipulating or trying to, through a proposed rulemaking, to overturn things such as consent agreements or the agreements that employees sign for confidentiality when they leave a job. Those kinds of meddlesome activities are precisely what suits like these enable. If they win, they're going to take this as a precedent and go after other parts of the economy. Another important consideration here is taxpayers. After all, that's why my organization is interested in this activity. Not only are tens of millions of dollars every year being spent on these suits alone, the whole antitrust empire of state and local governments costs hundreds of millions a year. We need to be sure those dollars are spent effectively, and equally important, we need to be sure that government activity is not squelching the kinds of innovations that actually make government agencies more efficient. You look at cloud data storage, for example, that saved the federal government more than $20 billion over the past couple of decades in terms of all of the mainframe costs that they used to have to shoulder. And government could sure use a lot of help updating its own technology. They're certainly not innovating in their space. They've got to depend on tech to carry them into the 21st century. And we're already about 23 years into that century.
Real quick, final question for you, Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union. Appreciate your time this morning. You said 4 out of the 7 claims brought by both the federal and state governments in this conjoined lawsuit were tossed out by the judge. There are 3 that remain. This lawsuit was originally filed at the tail end of 2020. We are now in the end of August of 2023. How much longer is this going to take, do you think?
The trial begins on September 12 on the remaining 3 charges. There are other suits against Google and other tech companies that are going to go on. And you have to think, if you were in one of these companies' positions, would you be investing as much money in developing new products if you knew that the government might come after you for it in the future? That's another price we're paying here.
there are chilling implications there on the market, to be sure. Pete Sepp, we got to let you run, I know. I really appreciate you checking in with us on this important issue, especially given that Colorado's Attorney General Phil Weiser is at the helm on